Welcome to the podcast Hot Tracks with Cold Liquids, where we discuss the history, lyrics, and music of our favorite albums while drinking the best beverages. Each episode, one of us submits an album which we add to an ongoing ranking. At the end of the year, we will tally up each of our total scores to determine unequivocally which one of us has the best taste in music.
Kate Bush is one of the most revolutionary artists of her generation, and she hit her creative apex on her 1985 album, Hounds of Love. Kate Bush sings and produces some of the most inventive art pop ever to be released. This album has routinely been the favorite of hipsters, but Kate Bush is once again receiving her dues, as her song, Running Up That Hill, is being featured in the latest season of Stranger Things. That's it.
That's it. Okay.
That's the whole video.
Yeah, she's also doing good on the charts again. She hit number one. It's like the longest period in between two number ones.
That's pretty
I think it's like 40 years or something like that.
I think it was like 37 or something. Yeah, 37. That would be the math. 1985 was 37 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. That's some good math, Nick.
Thank you. I went to
I don't
college.
know where 40 years came from. Anyways, this is some good music on this album. I really like what Kate Bush was really thinking.
It's pretty cool. I think my favorite thing was there was just such a range of topics and, well, I guess a range of sounds on this. It's very hard to pin down. Some of the songs are very like pop hits that are gonna be chart toppers, and then the B-side is almost like a prog rock kind of album concept.
It reminded me a lot of Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
And his style of kind of like mixing it. He mixes up his albums that kind of same way.
Well, they did do a duet together.
Well, there you go. That makes sense.
They're very, very connected.
That makes a lot of sense. I had thought the same thing, especially about The Big Sky. I really thought that sounded like a Peter Gabriel song.
Yeah, some of the like drum beats,
Yeah.
Especially early on in the album, give Peter Gabriel as well.
What was really surprising to me was some of the songs on the back half, especially Waking the Witch, almost reminded me of something more like Pink Floyd.
Well, she was discovered by David Gilmour of Pink Floyd.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, that's who discovered a tape mix that she made when she was like 19 or something like that. And that's how she got her start.
Nice.
Yeah, she was very young whenever she started. I think like her first song she wrote at like 13 or something like that.
Wow.
And like it's interesting because she had like a very tumultuous kind of early career in like trying to find what I guess her artistic vision is.
Mm-hmm.
And Hounds of Love is her going back home to Kent. She recorded a lot of her music originally in London, but Kent is where her parents are, and she built like this big studio with a lot of like pretty like state-of-the-art producing software or machines, all that jazz. And you can see that on this album where it's very I guess ahead of its time in the use of sampling and synthesizers, some of the drum machines. And I think it's like probably one of the best produced albums that I can think of, especially from the 80s. And I think even now it holds up pretty well. There's some tracks that I think could be released in 2022, and I would still think they're pretty good.
Definitely ahead of its time. It's interesting because nowadays I feel like it isn't that uncommon for somebody to produce their own album in their, like bedroom or whatever.
bedroom pop, that kind of stuff. But at that time, that would be insane. And it's sort of getting to the point, I guess, in the digital age where it's at least possible to do. But yeah, I I have no examples of anybody that had done that before her. As far as I know, she would have been the first, or at least.
I'm kind of surprised. I had like barely heard of Kate Bush before we were doing this, and then obviously she just recently like blew up on Twitter and everything because of the Stranger Things thing. But she was like really revolutionary, and I like had barely ever heard of her. But she was the first female artist to uh, have a number one hit with a self-written song, and also the first solo female artist to have the number one spot in the UK album charts as
Nice.
well. Um, which is insane that that took till 1985 as
Yeah.
well. If you think about all of the like artists beforehand that couldn't reach the solo charts, but I guess they were probably like beaten out by the Beatles and stuff like that until then. I guess
guess.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that she's very much like ahead of her time, but she also like kind of paved the way a lot of artists to come after. Would we have like Bjork or Joanna Newsom or even like I guess modern experimental pop artists like Charlie XCX without Kate Bush kind of like paving the way, not only just being a woman, but I guess some of her experimental approach to pop. Like it's hard to think of anybody who's this forward thinking in the genre before Kate Bush. Like it's she almost created a mold that wasn't there before.
Yeah,
And
it's like art pop kind of like
yeah,
I
like
can't think of
there's other musicians before, I
yeah.
guess you could describe as art pop, but like there's a lot even outside of like art pop. Like Coldplay, the song like Speed of Sound, I think is what it's called. It's just like a straight up knockoff of Running Up That Hill that was
Yeah.
acknowledged by the band.
I gotta say though, as much as she gets credit for being ahead of her time, it also sounds very. It gets sounds from like an album from 1985. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the sounds of synthesizers and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, she's not the first person to use synthesizers in the 80s by like 1985. I don't even mean that in a bad way, but this album sounds like very, very 80s, for better or for worse.
Yeah. It's very synth heavy, and the one thing I do like, I like the synth and strings mix, especially in the first half of the album is really cool. I also think it's an interesting concept to have like the whole first of the album, half of the album be like a bunch of like pop singles, and then the whole second half be like a uniform, like almost conceptual piece, kind of. I can't think of any other album that is like that.
Yeah, and it works. In my opinion, I think it works. Like it seems like a pretty seamless transition. And I think it's because the pop like chart albums, not albums. I think some of the like singles actually are pretty good, and I think they are the highlights of the album.
Mhm.
Cloud Busting, Running Up That Hill are both classic, perfect songs. And it was actually almost going to be Cloud Busting as the lead single instead of Running Up That Hill. She fought to have Running Up That Hill be the lead single, which I mean worked out. It's a classic song, and I think everybody it's starting to get appreciation once again as I guess like a greatest of all time song. It's definitely one of my favorites. Maybe not my favorite by her, but that's stiff competition. She's one of my favorite artists ever.
I also have to admit that I had never heard of her before a month ago when she was getting a bunch of hype online, which is weird. I don't really understand
how I'd never heard of her. But I guess, that happens all the time with music. It's impossible to know everything. It just,
Yeah, I had heard Wuthering Heights before, but I
Yeah,
hadn't
I
heard
hadn't heard
anything off
any
this
of her
album before,
stuff
including
at
Running Up
all.
the Hill.
It
really.
just,
I'm
it
surprised by that.
happens. That seems to happen to me all the time, despite listening to a ton of music. Somebody will still be like, "You've never heard of this band?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah, I had that with
Yeah,
you a couple years back with Elvis
yeah. I
Costello.
never heard of him. Well, I mean, this was a couple
Oh,
years
really?
ago. I know Elvis Costello
Well,
now.
now, yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
there's
Well,
always weird stuff like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I love her. She was one of my top listened to artists in 2021. Wuthering Heights was actually my second top listened to song
So I
of
guess
2021.
you liked it before it was
Um,
cool, or you liked it before it was cool a second time, though.
well, I don't know. Kate Bush has like this very rabid, like
Uh-huh.
cult following. So maybe I was late to the game because I don't know. People who like Kate Bush really like Kate Bush,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of sense. Um, so like I only really started listening to her a lot in 2020, um, and since then it's been like pretty solid album or artist as a whole on my rotation. It's a very good like any kind of thing music. If I'm going for a walk, like
Mm-hmm.
doing some coding or like doing chores, listening to this album is like pretty solid. So it's almost like it can be background music at times, and despite all the songs feeling super short, they're pretty long songs. It's like it might be the longest album we've listened to. No, I think
It's
better.
definitely shorter than Arcade Fire, but
You know what? We never talked about what we're drinking.
oh yeah.
All right, well, I'll start. So, I have a smoothie, and you may be wondering why a smoothie? Well, I'll tell you. It's a blueberry smoothie, and you know where blueberries grow? They grow on bushes. Kate Bush. There we go. Yes. These are not fresh, though.
I have some strawberry lemonade that my friend made.
Nice.
It's pretty good. It's really good actually. Yeah.
So I walked to the grocery store on an incline to get some big K soda. So I was running up that hill and made a deal with God and got my soda.
And you guys are just on the.
Yeah, try harder.
I need to get my act together with this drink. um. Oh, but I have a question for you guys. So obviously, like, this is supposed to be a front heavy album because like that's how it was written. But like for me, I felt like this album like really dropped off for the second half. And I know it's even like I know it's supposed to be like experimental more and more like artsy and like honestly though, it's weird because I don't want to say it didn't do it for me because like a couple of the songs like Hello Earth I really enjoy and then a couple of other ones I like did not like very much. And so for me, like I'm leaning towards this album being more of like a I like the singles off of it compared to like this is a great album as the album I can listen through the whole thing. And I'm wondering what you guys like think about that.
I think the singles are probably some of the best group of singles ever. Running Up That Hill, I think, is probably like a top 50 best songs ever written. And then Cloud Busting's also really good. But I like the second half. I think it's like really conceptual. It sounds good. I think it's creative.
It's definitely very conceptual. I just like didn't like I just didn't like the music very much. It was just a bit much for me, which is interesting because it's hard to be like a bit much for me. I tend to really like conceptual and artsy music. It was just I don't know. I think it was like all the synth. I was just kind of like by the end of it, I'm just like, eh.
To be fair, it kind of requires a high IQ to really understand
Well, that
Cougars,
tracks
but
because I liked the second half, or at least I would say some of my favorite songs are on the B side. Uh, I guess I don't know exactly where the cutoff is, but I assume it's right around Under Ice. Like,
I think it's the
okay,
last six songs. Yeah,
I liked Under Ice and Waking the Witch. Those were both really good.
I did not like Waking the Witch.
really, it's so
No,
good.
I don't like it. It like freaks me out a bit, and I don't. Makes me a little unnerved. I liked the second, like the last like two songs I really enjoy, and I like Watching You Without Me. Um, but the Jig of Life and Waking the Witch, I did not. They like took me out of it a little bit. I don't know. I think like I don't know. My biggest problem with it was like I like for Hello Earth, for example, I felt like I could just kind of dissociate, and it was like really nice calming music, and like all of the like background voices just like whispering and stuff in Waking the Witch, and like I don't it just I don't know. I didn't like it, but I understand it. I don't know. Wasn't for me.
See, Waking the Witch, I think, is some of the best production on the whole album. It's just great idea. I like everything about it.
It's cool. It just freaks me out. Like I just don't like it. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, it could be one of those things, if I listen to it a ton more, like I'll enjoy it. But I don't know. I was struggling. I went for like a last re-listen today, and I listened to like Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love, The Big Sky, and Cloud Busting, and uh, then I was just like, man, I'm kind of like I don't really want to listen to the rest of this. And so I kind of skipped a couple of songs and then finished out with Hello Earth and The Morning Fog, and I enjoyed the album much more better that way. I think I don't know.
The more I look at this album cover, I think I recognize it and I know where. I believe our parents have a copy of this on a cassette tape somewhere, like in a cabinet that I have seen before. Now I kind of
Maybe.
want to look back and see if I'm right.
And that means they're goated.
I think, yeah. Well, going off of that, I think this definitely helped to trigger that movement of like solo artists in the late '80s and early '90s, like Whitney Houston and stuff like that, to like kind of cement that like as pop music. Some of those like longer ballads that before like wouldn't have been popular, say in like the '60s and '70s.
Well, so the rise of Kate Bush also coincides with the rise of Madonna.
I was gonna say it's
So
close to Madonna as well.
during this period, Madonna actually released, I believe, her first two albums in between the previous album release and this production. So it's like two very similar, like very poppy music, because this was
Yeah,
her earlier years, like
and I
pre-Britney.
honestly I think that could have hurt the Kate Bush's like playtime in the United States as well.
Well, this
Um,
album actually overtook
oh,
Madonna's
really?
second
Ooh,
as
drama.
a number one, I believe. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean they're
What
both
was
very
that in the
good.
UK or the US though?
I don't know. There's too many charts.
But
Let
I
me
could see
just
this being a situation, where it's like UK has Kate Bush, US has Madonna. Even though I think they're very like I mean not very different, but like they're definitely different.
Yeah.
But again, both of those artists for sure sparked that like late '80s, early '90s. You have just like you can just produce these 5-6 minute ballads, and they're hitting the top of the pop charts, and like I think that yeah, Kate Bush definitely played a role in that.
I gotta say,
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it's what the genre is, but I am not a huge fan of all of the synthesizers and samples. I like songs that have actual instruments and stuff instead of drum kits and uh yeah. The string, I like the string parts, but if they were actual strings, I think it would have had more body to it, and the tone is better.
I disagree in this case, um, because like honestly, I think it works really well in this album, similar to like how it works well on a Peter Gabriel album or whoever, like um, I don't know. I think normally I'd be on your side, but I think it works really well on this album. I also think we haven't even talked about, it, but Kate Bush has an amazing voice.
Yeah.
Just a really good singing voice, and that was probably my favorite part of the album. Was just like she has a really
She
really good
does,
singing
and
voice.
a lot of range. Not well, I mean, yes, in actual like literal sense of the notes, octaves, whatever. But I mean, uh, in like tone, that some of the songs are very pretty ballads, and other songs are very dark, kind of prog rock stuff, and she's able to pull both of those off very convincingly.
Kate Bush is a really interesting lady. She's been like reclusive since she released this album. It's kind of like the Avatar, where like they just vanish. And she's released albums since, but like um, this was her big one. And then she just kind of releases albums whenever she feels like it. And I think she's just like chilling out, probably in like Kent. Um, but she owns like all of the music. So whenever she owns the masters. So whenever the song like blew up on every platform imaginable, she's been raking in like millions of dollars a day.
Yeah, so she's made like
yeah,
just an absolute like
Yeah.
ton of
Have
money.
either of you seen the show Atlanta? That's like it's a big thing in one of the episodes, like who
Nope.
owns the masters. I didn't know that was such a big thing in music production, but apparently it is.
Yeah, that was the whole Taylor Swift thing. You know how she's been re-releasing all of her albums? It's
yeah.
because somebody else owns the masters. So she's not like, it's a whole thing. Scooter Braun. And that's why she's been releasing Taylor's version of everything.
Yep.
Because
Yeah, I'm sure Taylor Swift isn't making enough money. Sorry.
Hey, I think
true.
we've been getting some
Yeah.
good content out of the whole fiasco.
It's a pretty messed up business. I'm not going to
So-
say it's not.
But anyway, she's making like so much money. I don't even know like what. It's one of those where she's been like just chilling out there in England, and I think I don't even know what you would do with that much money out of nowhere. Like imagine getting millions of dollars a day, and like it's almost like I think she should. Okay, she should reintroduce Cougars into the eastern
Okay.
United States. I saw this Twitter thread where there's still like there's no cougars in the eastern United States, but there's plenty of land that's like cougarable.
This is our spin-off
They could be like
podcast
reintroduced with no problems.
about cougars. You know, Speaking of Cougars, no, hang on. Speaking of Cougars, there's such a low amount of Cougars in some areas that they are getting stuck with really bad genes because the ones that are left, their babies, like also have the bad genes, and there aren't enough to get rid of them. So it's a real problem. Or I guess it's the Florida Panther I'm thinking of, but it's probably Cougars too. If I was Kate Bush, I would buy a bunch of land in Indiana, and then everybody would have to deal with me if they wanted to get through Indiana. So if you wanted to like ship something from the East Coast to the West Coast, you would either have to do what I say or you'd have to go all the way around.
So you're just gonna be the Indiana Toll Road?
Yes, I'm going to buy the Indiana Toll Road and a bunch of land around it as well.
I would buy a bunch of land in Indiana and name it Hawkins and recreate the plot of Stranger Things, which takes place
Yes.
in Hawkins, Indiana.
Yeah.
There we go. We circled it back.
To make it real.
We circled it back to Kate Bush.
And in the season 4, I would make them sing the song "Running Up That Hill." So, what do you guys think is the best track?
The best track?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's time for our classic segment. Hot and cold tracks.
Reintroduced Panthers, not reintroduced Panthers.
Max is visibly unhappy with this discussion.
Anyways, awesome. What's your favorite track on the album?
Oh, mine is "Running Up That Hill." Parentheses.
Hot take.
Yeah, it's a good song. I really like it.
Yeah.
It's kind of boring, but I think it's a good song. I like the thematic element of switching places.
Wait, you mean the song is boring or the
It's kind of a boring choice. It's like
Oh, I see. Okay, I was like,
it's
wait.
kind of like
Yeah.
So like Kate Bush really likes writing songs from other people's perspectives. Her song "Wuthering Heights" is from the perspective of Kathy, the book "Wuthering Heights," and "Cloud Busting" is like from a perspective of like a boy from a book she read, which is a whole other thing. But it's
Mhm.
about her, like the dad being like discredited scientist, whatever. But it's a good song. I like it.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite as well. Partially because it was the reason I listened to the album in the first place. When it got super popular, I thought, yeah, well, I'll listen to the album. I saw somewhere that it was good, and yeah, it's kind of hard to beat. Although I thought about putting Cloud Busting in that number one spot. It's a close second, but I think Running Up That Hill is a little better.
Well, my favorite song, one we haven't really talked about, was the titular song of the album, "Hounds of Love," was my favorite. It was super upbeat. It's a jam, and I love the synth and the drums on it. It's just got a great beat. It's a little more like I feel like it's a little more artsy than some of the other like singles off the album, but it's not as like abstract as later in the album, and it's kind of in that sweet spot that I enjoy, especially when it comes to pop music, of having like these artsy elements in it. And yeah, it was definitely my favorite on the album.
What about the sample in the beginning from
The
the
sample.
horror movie Night of the Demon,
Oh,
where it says it's in the trees? It's
Yeah,
coming. That's from a horror movie.
cool. I like samples like that when they throw in little
Yeah, it was
blurbs.
fun, and it wasn't as like it wasn't as much. You know, it was like a little thing as like some of the songs later on the album where it's just like people talking for like a minute and a
Yeah.
half, and I'm like, just. Nah.
So what about the worst tracks?
Yeah, probably Jig of Life. It wasn't horrible. It just meh.
I agree. How about you, Max?
Okay. I'm stuck between Mother Stands for Comfort and Waking the Witch. And
Bad take.
I'm probably gonna go with Mother Stands for Comfort because Waking the Witch I at least understand like the concept of it because it's part of that like abstract section of the album, and so I respect it even though it's not like my favorite song. But I don't know what's going on with Mother Stands for Comfort. I thought it was not a great song, and it's on the like singly half of the album, and it's definitely not a single. I don't know what it's doing, and I don't know. I just didn't care for it very much.
I like that song quite a bit. That was in the upper tier for me for this album.
Yeah, I feel similar.
I think I liked kind of the little trippy sort of bass line. And
Kate Bush's worst track on this album is better than your favorite artist's whole discography.
I might disagree with that take, but
don't misquote me on that one. That was a joke.
better than the Minions.
Oh no, it depends on which Minion. Is it the Bob solo album or the
Stewart?
Honestly, the Minions movie 2 soundtrack is better than some of your favorite artists' whole discography.
what do you think are or where are you ranking this? Do you think?
I'm gonna put it at the top. Why not? I really like it.
Respect.
It's a good one. I'm putting it at the top.
I really hate to do this, and I know it's not going to stay here, but I feel like it's at the bottom of what we've done so far. And it's not because I don't like it. It's just really hard to put it above stuff that I've listened to a million times, I guess. You know what I mean? Like half of the albums we've done are like already some of my favorites, you know? And the only ones that I hadn't listened to a million times are Brian Wilson, which is like, come on, I mean, it's still the Beach Boys, so I'm very familiar with that. And then the Pixies. So between this and the Pixies' Doolittle, I thought Doolittle was better. But I'm
gonna put this just above Close to the Edge.
Wow.
And then I'm going to, and that was my. Actually, I'll have to think about it a bit. But I think I'm gonna put it. Yeah, I'll have to redo some rankings, but I think I'll put it just above Close to the Edge.
So fourth.
I think
I have the list right here.
Okay. I'm confused because I'm in a three-way. Like, I think this album's worse than Vampire Weekend, but I think it's better than Close to the Edge. But I had Close to the Edge above Vampire Weekend, so
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't want to put both of Nick's albums last so far, though. So
you know,
that might be swaying my decision, but
it's okay. I'll survive.
Hey Max, what album are you going to be picking for this next coming week?
Well, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm going to do one of my favorites. I've been listening to it for a long time. It's Tapestry by Carole King, one of the all-time greats.
Nice. That was
Change what album?
That was a joke.
It was a joke.
It was a bad joke.
Definitely cut that.
We're cutting all this out. We're gonna cut Nick's audio.
just remove me.
Cut Nick. Austin, you want to start a podcast?
Hey, I think we should start a podcast. I think it should be called Cold tracks.
Ooh,
Warm
guys, wait, Austin, that's what we should do. When Nick's gone, we can make another YouTube channel called Cold Tracks with Hot Liquids. And then we drink teas, different kinds of teas, and talk about what music we hate. Yeah. Well, they said they weren't ever going to do one again, and then there was talks that they were going to do it. So.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at HTWCL to see memes and updates on the show. And we'll see you next time. We'll be uploading every 2 weeks on Monday nights.